Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Entrepreneur Encounters. I'm Brent Halfwasson. I'm an entrepreneur coach and business catalyst, and I want to help you unleash your business. Our goal here at Halfwasson Associates is to help empower entrepreneurs and business owners to find the money, mindset, and means to be able to level up your business. Today, I've invited Lindsay Roddy to join us with RoddyMedical. She has done an amazing journey from coming up with a brilliant idea that probably was solving a great problem, and then beginning to build it into a business that you're really going to appreciate. So I want you to stay tuned for that interview. But let's talk a little bit about why Entrepreneur Encounters. I believe that entrepreneurs and business owners thrive when we get the opportunity to meet other folks who are on the same path with us. There are a lot of shows that talk about folks who've maybe made it. I want to talk about the folks who are making it right now, because that's where you're at as a business owner. You need to reach out, you need to get connected, you need to hear people's stories. So that's why we do that. And that's why I'm super excited to have Lindsay on today. So Lindsay, welcome to our show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me, Brent.
Awesome. Well, since we got you on the screen, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your business, please.
Yes. So my name is Lindsay Roddy, as Brent said. I worked with Brent from the very beginning of the business when I wasn't even sure if this was, what this was going to look like long-term, if it was going to be a business or not, all the way through to, pretty recently, I would say. And here we are again now. So I am a nurse by background. I've been a nurse for 8 years in intensive care and the recovery room when you come out of surgery. And the idea for the business started out of a personal experience I had with a patient where a patient almost lost his life. We get patients up very quickly after open heart surgery. And those are the patients that I was working with. And even just a couple hours after surgery, and they can have 5 to 15 lines coming out of various locations. And so as we were getting this gentleman up with therapy, the line that was holding his life support medication in his neck got caught and pulled out. And he started to deteriorate. We had to bring the doctors in. They rushed into the room. We do some interventions, and thank goodness he was okay. But I was not after that for a while. I started asking questions of my fellow colleagues. What are you doing to prevent something like this from happening? And has this happened to you? And it was frightening how many times people said, oh yeah, that's happened to me. And we started hearing story after story after story of scary incidences that may or may not have been reported due to time constraints or fear of reporting or whatever the case was. And in the meantime, we were taping things together: medicine cups, tongue depressors. I went to one hospital and they were using incontinence pads rolled up actually as part of their line kit, which seems contrary in the advanced medical space that we live in today. And so that's how RoddyMedical was started, with our first product, which we call the Secure Move TLC. And so that was an interesting journey that we'll get into here shortly.
Yeah, awesome. Why did you want to become an entrepreneur? This could have been an idea that you just went to the front office and said, we got to fix this. Like, this is ridiculous that we're using coffee cups and whatever in order to make this work.
So in healthcare, you can't quite go to the front office, and it's not so simple. So even if you had an idea and you go to a big player like BD or whoever, I won't call names, but whoever it is, they need to see legs to an idea. They need to see that there's a return on investment. They need to see that there's something there. Even now, before we, the long-term goal is to partner with a big entity as a, original equipment manufacturing partner, just because of we could talk about that too, the ecosystem and the way that it works. However, they need to see that there's sales. So it was a bumpy journey getting there. I knew nothing about medical device. I knew nothing about business. I had no background in any of that. And so I'm really grateful for Brent, because I came to him with some, preconceived ideas of how this might work. And he kind of set me a little straight on some paths. And I met Brent when it was just me. And we started forming a team in 2019. But I was reluctant at the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, but I saw that that was the way that this had to happen in order for this really to have legs and get into the market. I had to do it. Like, we had to do it. So
go ahead and tell us more of your journey, like how that process evolved, because I think that's an essential part for folks who are looking.
Definitely. So it started, one, with the experience I just mentioned to you, that very close call with my own patient, hearing other people's stories. And I had someone just ask me the question, well, what are your ideas, when they were working on their own company? And I'm like, I never thought of that before. Let me think through that. And my mind went back to that one instance with that patient. And so I started gluing things together from the Home Depot and from the hardware store, started drawing things on paint, because if you remember that, I used to play with that as a kid, paint. I don't have CAD. I'm not an engineer. And started to try to think through what this would do. What would this need to do? And that was bolstered by talking to people. I cannot emphasize how important it is to continue to talk to people about their problems and not necessarily your solution all the time. Ask them about their problems because you need to solve their problems. So it actually changed very much from the initial drawings and glued together stuff, which my first one was Sculpey and twist ties in my oven in this house. This is my home office. And it's evolved so much since then. So we got involved in an accelerator program. There was coaching that I worked with Brent to get coaching. We went through the National Science Foundation Innovation Corps program. And then finally in 2019, started to build a team. But I had background. I had testimonials of people talking about the problem. We had done some initial prototyping and gotten people involved. And so I think the problem was evident. And we knew what we needed to do relatively, what requirements we needed to fill to create a solution. And that's when I started to bring on my team in 2019, which was a big step, because it's a little rough to go it alone, as I'm sure a lot of you can attest to, depending on what your venture is, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah. Can you walk through the prototyping process? Because I know probably baking stuff in your oven was not the long-term. That wasn't the long-term plan to bake things.
No.
But I think it shows the scrappiness, the resourcefulness, and hey, whatever it takes, all I need is an initial prototype to say, because you bring it to someone like, I can't really envision it. You're like, here, I just sculpted this yesterday and cooked it in my oven and put some twist ties on it. What do you think?
Right. And that's why I was trying to get across what this thing needed to do. And I was like, well, there's a couple of ways we could go about this. Maybe we could do it this way. We could do it this way. We could do it this way. I mean, we probably have, I don't think my engineering partner counts my early prototypes. However, I do. So I would say maybe like 75 different prototypes to get to where we are now. So it's a lot of iteration. And and what also went along with that is interviews. So before we even started prototyping, I went out and I asked people about their problem. I know I'm a nurse, but I'm one nurse. Even though I deal with the problem directly, maybe a physical therapist has a different way of looking at it. Maybe a physician has a different way of looking at it. So I just started asking them about their problems. And it was clear that my idea was close, but not quite there based on their feedback. So based on their feedback, we did the drawings. I glued stuff together. Then I started working with who now became my business partner, Kyle Jansen, who ran the UWM Prototyping Center. And so even those looked a little funky, but you're trying to get a proof of concept. So sometimes you need to get a functional proof of concept. What I had was not functional, but it showed like, okay, this is what I want it to do. Kyle got something where it's a proof of concept. It works, but it looks bad. It looks very clunky. And with those 6 or so prototypes, I went back again to the people I had been talking to back in the break room and bribed them with food and sat there for all day for 4 days and had them give feedback on these with, again, the stipulation that this is not the final, but I just need we need to see what your thoughts are. And so every single prototype has been in the hands of the end user, has been in the hands of a nurse, has been in the hands of a physician, a physical therapist. And I'm very proud of that, because that's also not normal for medical device development. And I really think it should be, which is after doing this, it was critical to making sure that we were really nailing the need, that we were really fulfilling this need.
Well, I mean, I think that's perfect. Are you willing to share with us? I know you went through a specific program to help you on that customer discovery and do those interviews, Idea Advance, and you've done a couple of rounds of that. Can you talk a little bit about the program, how it worked for you, what they asked you to do, and what you benefited from? Because I think just a quick coach's diatribe here. I think not enough folks get out and do what you did, do that customer discovery, actually talk to real potential users or customers and say, what do you think? 75 versions of a prototype seems like a lot. But I got to tell you, there's a few folks out there that probably need to get a few more versions of their prototype before they go to the final, because there's good feedback to be gotten.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we didn't go with my initial ideas. I thought it was about tubing organization, and it's not. It's about tubing securement. That's the problem. That's the main problem. Our tagline is confidence and safety and mobility. So yes, so we got involved in the National Science Foundation Innovation Corps program, and there's a regional one here in Milwaukee, but there are nodes all across the country. They will give you a small grant, which is kind of nice. So in the regional programs, we got about $2,400. The national program is about $50,000. Now, that is also, it can be used for some prototyping and things, but it also is to help get you in front of your end users, your customers. We did not just interview clinicians. We moved into FDA consultants, people in sales and medical device sales, people who are in distribution companies, everyone that we could think of in the industry that might play a role, and ask them what their biggest frustrations were around this particular space that we were trying to play in. What the National Science Foundation Corps started was brought with Brent to business model canvas, starting with this thing called the business model canvas, and mapping out what you think is correct, what you think, who you think your customer is going to be, what value are you going to serve to them, what kind of revenue streams are you going to get, how are you going to get money, who are your partners going to be, because you can't do it all, right? And then getting the interviews to back that up or not back that up, challenging your assumptions. And we had quite a few assumptions challenged. So National Science Foundation program. Then we went into the Idea Advance Accelerator program, which is a fantastic Wisconsin program. I cannot give it enough praise. They have a wonderful team. The stage one comes with a $25,000 grant, and the National Science Foundation interviews helped us prep to apply for this. And they'll help you apply for it. If you call their office and say, hey, I have an application, can you look at it? They will. I worked with people at their office. And what that did is it continued to flush out these interviews. So we've done over 3 years, about 300 interviews or so. And then after that, they asked the difficult question, like, awesome, you've gotten these interviews, fantastic. You've nailed that safety is an issue. You've nailed that this is an issue as well. Go quantify that for me. Get me a dollar sign behind that. And that was their voice challenging our assumptions was so critical. And we actually went and collected some data at multiple hospitals, just timing how long things took with all of these lines, tubes, and cords to get people up and moving, because that's a very big value to organizations these days. And we were able to put a dollar sign on it, which then stepwise got us to where we are now with getting some investment funds.
So what is the process like? I presume you didn't just have 300 great friends that you went to school with that you know intimately and could just be like, hey, I want to talk to you about this. Right. This is the heart. One of the questions I get whenever I say, hey, I think you need to go out and talk to 10, 20, probably 50 different customers and get some feedback. People are like, how do I get in front of them? Tell us how you found them, how you queued them up for the question, how you got the interview.
Yeah, so good question. So it started with people I knew. So I had the ability to have access to nurses. If not, you find where nurses are. So we went to conferences and just say, hey, I would like your insight. You're asking for their advice. You're asking for their insight. And that people are usually much more willing to help you than you would think they would be. So it started with those I knew. We actually mapped out who are people that deal with this problem all the time. And that's where we targeted first, the end user, and then it expanded out to others. And it's your network. I did some cold reach outs via LinkedIn, and I used one of my friends who has been a VP of sales actually helped me kind of craft my message, because don't all of us get, I don't know, I get so many things from LinkedIn where it's like, you don't know what I do. So if you create the right personalized message that's short and sweet and is asking for their advice, you're not asking to sell them. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I would actually put that in my emails or my LinkedIn messages. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I would like 15 minutes to ask you 3 questions. And people, again, are more willing to help you than you would think. But networking, going to conferences, finding the people, where are the customers? Where are they? Go to what they go to, and just sit around and ask about them, ask questions about their frustrations. People like to share what they're frustrated about. And that's how you get into what problem you really need to solve. So Does that answer your question, Brent?
No, I think that's excellent. What's the balance on like what percentage of folks would actually respond to you on these solicitations? I mean, I'm sure some folks would say, no thanks, or maybe wouldn't reply. Again, we're trying to bring normalcy on here. Like you met 300 interviews. I guess it was more than 300 requests for interviews that you had to make.
Absolutely. And it was over 3 years. Keep that in mind. The first one was 40. I think 40 was the first through the Student Startup Challenge, this thing that I did as well at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. But yeah, I would absolutely say, I mean, maybe double or triple that. You might get a third. And it depends how cold or how warm that connection is, and how quickly you follow up too. You need to be quick to follow up. So if you get a business card that same day or within 24 hours, you send them an email, remember something from that conversation. It's like sales. Remember that something from that conversation. Thank you so much. I thought your pictures of your dog were so cute. Thank you for showing those to me. I'd also really love your opinion and your thoughts on, medical tubing hazards and safety in the hospital as as a safety control person. That's not, as an occupational health nurse or something.
Yep. No, that makes sense. How did you have to adapt we talked about prototype evolution. How did you have to adapt your business along and your business concept and maybe sometimes even the scale and scope of what you envisioned it was going to be? Tell us how that adapted over time.
Yeah. So I worked with Brent a lot on the pitch at the very beginning on thinking of how big of a market, how do you build your market? How do you make sure that it's the right size? Some of this depends on if you're going to go for investment or not too, how you're framing things. I would say pricing was another thing that my mind was kind of over here on, and multiple people through coaching just said, you need to think bigger, test the price point. And I'm so glad we did, because in my mind, this needed to be a much lower price item. I'm just thinking of what I pull off the wall as a nurse. Then when I started finding out about what the prices were, I thought, holy cow, that's crazy. Do we really pay that much for these things? Yes, we do. Well, let's rethink how we're pricing this. We upped the price for our financial model. And then when we actually went out and started talking to people who could be decision makers, we tested a higher price point and it wasn't a problem. Which was kind of like, wow, that surprised me a lot, but we're very excited about it. So pricing, we had to learn about reimbursement. In medical device, there's certain levels of reimbursement. So you want to find out, how do you work in this system? Because that might change your business model. You actually you might want to get a reimbursement consultant, someone who can help align your regulatory strategy with your reimbursement strategy. We don't have to do that because we are a supply item that's covered under the room charge of the hospital. So we found that out. That was a more recent one. We also, trying to think of, I'm picturing the business model canvas in front of me right now. I mean, who partners we're going to be. So we found out selling direct to a hospital is hard. You need to work within the ecosystem. And so through these programs, we did ecosystem mapping, and through talking to distributors and original equipment manufacturing and people in sales, hospitals buy on contract. So they buy on contract with these large companies such as Cardinal Health and Abbott and Baxter, and it makes it that much easier for them to purchase. So that is our long-term strategy. We will be doing some direct sales, and our price point allows us to come in that range where we can do direct sales, but we had to really map out that ecosystem. And so initially, oh yeah, we'll just go sell this to hospitals. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. And that came out through all of these interviews.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Talk to me about the learning process. You're already hitting on some of it. You learned a lot just through interviews, but you have to deal with the FDA because you're dealing with medical equipment. You have to deal with a variety of different hospital systems, which have their own processes and flows. You have third-party suppliers. You probably have manufacturing. There's a lot that didn't come with your nursing degree. So talk to me about how you kind of stay on top of the industry, or how you keep learning what it takes to be in the industry.
Sure. So talk to people. I'm very privileged to have an excellent group of advisors that have come alongside me throughout this whole process. It's been, a lot of people who are much smarter than I in a lot of different areas, giving advice and feedback, being willing to share an assumption with some of these advisors, and then let them either say yay or nay, or, and the other piece is bringing in the right team. I would say I am no engineer, but we have a fantastic engineer on our team, Kyle Jansen, who has worked on medical devices in the past and has an idea of how to do quality audits, some of the key things that you need to do. And we had to learn some of what was necessary as now a medical device, contracting with manufacturers. How do we hold our manufacturers accountable? And that was through bringing in someone who was an FDA expert and a regulatory consultant who had worked for some of these large companies. She's fantastic. My business partner coming in knows a lot more about manufacturing. She's been in that world for 30 plus years, in the medical device world for 30 years. And not only that, but since she's worked in the manufacturing side and doing marketing, she was able to help us with financials, things we didn't really know we needed. So she worked with someone she was connected to, who's now our kind of for hire CFO, who help build the financials so that they make sense when you are working with manufacturers to produce a medical product. So it's been, when you don't know, you go ask, do you know anybody who knows? There was a lot of outreach to mentors, a lot of outreach to other people who we had talked to in these interviews. And sometimes you're just kind of going from one person to the other, but you just keep asking. And getting experts involved as much as you can. Does that answer your question, Brent?
And it takes a lot of courage, right? It takes a ton of courage to be able to get out there. I remember when we first met, and some of it comes from not knowing, but I think through some of the programs you did, and then some of the experience. When you have success breeds success. So when you get a few people willing to say, yeah, sure, I'll give you feedback, I'll give you my advice, I'll give you some thoughts, I'll share my frustrations and rants. Like, no one gets to ask me that these days. I'd love to rant. You start to feel like it's not hard anymore, but it's not impossible. It's not the unknown challenge that we can't overcome. So I think that's super. You mentioned that you've gotten some funding so far for the business, but walk us through. You got a long process, a lot of prototypes, multiple years. Talk to me about how you funded this project and how you kept it going, both with your time and personal funds and whatever else it took to get to where you're at today.
Sure. So from a funding perspective, it started with me and my credit card in Home Depot. And then from there, I partnered with our technology transfer firm at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. If anyone decides to do that, there are positives and negatives with partnering with a technology transfer firm. I'm happy to talk to anybody offline about that. And so they paid for some initial patent costs on the idea and what we wanted to try to do before we had even really gone through all of these prototypes. But we knew we had narrowed in on requirements. So they helped with those fees. We got involved in the National Science Foundation Innovation Corps program. Again, that was that $2,400 grant. And that's when I went to the prototyping center with Kyle, who now is my business partner, and said, hey, this is what I need this to do. Can you help me? And
that's the UWM prototyping center?
Yes. And they're fantastic. They have so much capability. Just they're up in actually in the same building as our office now, so that we can be close to Kyle when he's working. And so he took that, got 6 prototypes, and probably gave, was generous with his time and talking to me. And again, you're not going to get a final prototype. If you go into a prototyping center, it's very expensive to get to a final product. If you give them even, that's not going to get you there. Just saying, $2,500, being realistic, and they'll go through that with you. But some of them were 3D prints. Some of them, I think most of them were 3D prints. And that, with the data that we had, from the from the National Science Foundation Innovation Corps program, and from we continued to do interviews, We had these prototypes, we had pictures, we had an idea of what some of these things would cost. We applied for the idea advance. We weren't sure if we were going to get it. That was our first big grant. And so with that really launched us forward. That was a $25,000 grant, but we had to make the case. And I could refer to interviews. I could say, here's a quote from 6 different people on this part of the issue. Here's a quote from these people on this part of the issue. By the way, I'm a nurse. I've been through this. Kyle says this is possible. I've worked with an engineer who says that we can do this. And so through all of that, we had the fodder to apply for this grant and be competitive. So we got the grant. We went through the program, continued to build our repository of information about why this is a problem, and we didn't even go in that program deep into how do you build a financial model or some of these other things. We just focused on the problem, the return on investment, and these things. You have to have those as a base to have a company. And so that pushed us forward. We got the We're All Innovating grant in 2020. We also got Idea Advance Phase 2 because we were the only company to get Idea Advance Phase 2, and there's 2 phases, which is a $75,000 grant. And through those, I mean, it just launched everything forward. But again, it was building the case, showing them what we'd done in the initial program, taking advantage of every minute of time we had with those advisors, showing them what we did with what they gave us and say, look, we were stewards of that. Let me show you what we can do with this now. And so we met all of our, and Idea Advance Phase 2 is a little more hands-off. With that, we said, we're going to find our manufacturing partners. We did that. We're going to finish our quality system with the FDA. We did that. We're going to do this, 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 and this, and this is how much it's going to cost. And by completing that, we were able to finish out the grant, because they give it to you as you meet milestones. They give you segments of funding. And then it was after that we realized, so we really need investment. We did apply for 2, we applied for an SBIR and an STTR grant. You have about 1 in 6 shot of getting that, but those are about $250,000 if you can get those grants. And that can really help a company too. I've seen that get them off the ground. But we just partnered with 2 investment firms here in Milwaukee to get our seed round of $600,000. And again, those interviews helped support our financial model. I can't even tell you how much things are going to cost. How much does a distribution partner take if we have to go that route? What if we go this route? And really calculating things in, and to get investment, you have to have that financial model showing this is how much we think we could make in this amount of time. And here are our assumptions. Here, a list of our assumptions. We believe these are reasonable. You take a look though. And so it's been a journey, and I've put in some of my own funds as well. And I'm very privileged to have a supportive husband who also makes money. And he's been very supportive of this whole effort. He's got a medical background as well. So I think he gets it in a different way than many might.
Yeah, that's an amazing journey. What I'm hearing, the key takeaway is you would take the opportunity you have, starting with a $2,400 grant, and maximize its opportunity, and learn. And then you do the free things, which are going out and networking. They don't cost you money. They do cost you time, which isn't free. They do. So I shouldn't call it free, but you do the items that don't take you additional cash, and you make that investment, and then you continue to build every time to a different tier. And I want to take a moment, if I can, to emphasize, because as you know, Lindsay, my background started in finance, and I just intrinsically believe there's a huge tie between your operations and your numbers. And it sounds like you were able to answer operational questions and tie it right back down to the numbers. And I have to tell every entrepreneur, business owner, and side hustle, and founder and CEO is listening to this. If you don't understand that relationship, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a CPA. You don't have to master the spreadsheet. You don't need to be the next Excel guru to teach something on YouTube. But what you do need to know is how your operations impact your numbers, and how what you've shown in the numbers bear out in your operations. If you can do those two things, you bring so much credibility. And I would bet dollars to donuts from the time we first talked, Lindsay. And I remember my famous suggestion to you was you need to add another zero. I didn't think the vision was quite big enough. And I think it turned out to be true and then some. And now it has put you in a different place to be able to move forward. There are so many times that as owners, if you get that understanding, the credibility becomes so solid because it just feels like, wow, these folks know what they're talking about. They've talked to people about the problem. They understand where their numbers are coming. And ideally, then you're getting partners and investors and mentors and supporters who can bring you ancillary support in other ways or complement you in other ways to drive you forward. So do take advantage of that key learning from Lindsay. Thanks for that.
Yes.
Tell us about, why don't you take us out here? Tell us about your brand. How do you want customers to perceive you? I think the product's on the cusp of launching, if I'm correct.
That is correct.
So this is commercial time. Go ahead and sell us on what we need to know.
Yes. So our tagline is confidence and safety and mobility. What we provide is a device that, I could not find anything like it on the market. So getting patients up and moving, there is a huge risk of pulling out essential lines that often provide life support to these patients. And when we talked to 150 clinicians, over 60% of them said that they had witnessed a close call, meaning someone fell, no one got hurt, maybe something pulled out, but nothing bad happened. And then 23% of them witnessed a potentially life-threatening safety event, meaning something pulled out, something broke, someone was bleeding, life support stopped, someone cardiac arrested, 7 patient deaths were reported. With this device, it could prevent those incidences from happening. Our top competitor breaks. So let me just go through the 3 things that make our product different than anything else on the market. One is if you have this attached to a patient arm, and I should have grabbed one, Brent, but I have it upstairs. But if you have this on a patient's arm, on a bed rail, wherever you need it as a nurse, and the lines pull from one side, the force is going to hit the device, not the patient. The top competitor breaks at about 9 pounds of force when something is pulled. It takes about 10 pounds of force to pull out a line that is sutured into a patient. Ours can take up to 40 pounds. That's one of the big selling points. That's why ours works and nothing else we found works. And then it's made for versatility. So you can, as a patient, can feel more confident getting up and moving, which we know helps you long-term get better faster, spend less time in rehab, all of those things, and saves the hospital up to 3.7 million a year. So it's confidence and safety and mobility. One thing I'm so proud of, again, is that every single product has been in the hands of a nurse, a provider of some kind. So, we went to those people to understand their problems and understand what they face with you as a patient so that we could really meet that need head on. This product will be finished. It'll be through the FDA process by the end of August and then can be put on patients at that point. So we're starting to do demos. We're starting to talk to the people that have written us letters of support, that have been walking with us through this journey, that are the clinicians. And I'm so excited to get this out there and be able to have it on patients and prevent what happened to me. And I'll prevent these stories that I kept hearing and keep hearing about line hazards.
Well, that's awesome, Lindsay. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. And don't worry about not being able to show us the demo. In the description down below in YouTube, we'll make sure to have links to Lindsay's website. And if you have some other videos and other things you want us to link to so that we can see what you have in terms of the product in action, that would be amazing. But I do just want to encourage everyone. Lindsay had quite a few key takeaways. If I were to list the big ones you want to walk away with, you got to talk to a lot of people. You really got to understand your problem. She mentioned it. She initially thought it was about organizing. It turns out it's about line security. She wasn't like way off the base, but sometimes you don't have to be that far off to end up in the ditch on the road. So keep asking those questions, keep learning, keep making sure your finances tie to your operations. And if you get stuck, you just got to go out there and keep moving forward. So again, Lindsay, thanks for coming on. I appreciate everyone joining us. Again, this is Brent Halfwasson, Entrepreneur Encounters. I've got to talk about a couple of sponsors because these folks are amazing. But before I do that, if you like what you're getting on Entrepreneur Encounters and you want to encounter more entrepreneurs, Wednesdays at 4:30 Central, we're providing an opportunity for entrepreneurs to come together, share their stories, get feedback from other entrepreneurs. We just talked about that, getting feedback. Get feedback from other entrepreneurs. You can work your challenges, share goals and opportunities you want people to keep you accountable for. This is right now, it's a free resource that a lot of people are getting amazing value of. We have not had one session go by in over a year where we didn't have at least one entrepreneur coming out with a key breakthrough or understanding or feeling the support that they needed. So do join us, bit.ly/entrepreneur encounters. You can sign up. You'll get the link to be able to join us on that. I'm running it free through the rest of this summer. So I do want to encourage you to get in and take advantage of that. We do have some sponsors, and I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge them. Andrew Feller Photography does all our photography work, both here and on our website. Buckethead Creative is working with us on bringing our graphics to a whole new level. Charlie's Music Factory and Chris Crane, they're going to do our music on the way out. And Milwaukee Web Designs, and Megan Bruzan does an amazing job and hosts our website for us. So I do, again, thank you. If you like what you saw, please go ahead and hit like on the buttons below and subscribe to our channel when the buttons show up, and check out some of our other past episodes. I think you will find that the opportunities that are out there are amazing, and you continue to get some stories. So with that, we're going to ask Chris to take us out.